We're going to item 8 on page 40. So if we can, have a bit of quiet. No more chatting from the Deputy Mayor. Councillors, we've got Vanessa and Mike from the HCBA who are just getting the presentation organised. Are you right? Okay. Vanessa, the floor is yours. This is just a reminder. This is their 6-monthly report. This is not the financial report, which are going to be coming in the next time round, I presume. No, oh. So it's not.
They got sent out. They were sent out after the last meeting.
After the last meeting. So, well, if we don't have them in front of us, we can't discuss them. So that's something we'll look into, the timing of that, because I think that was one of the things we need to is actually have them. Yeah. Okay, look, we'll sort that bit out later.
One less thing.
Yeah, yep. Over to you, Vanessa, thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Just to clarify this morning, because you have all received a copy of our report, we thought we'd just spend some time, or Mike would spend some time highlighting the commercial landscape, which we felt would be of interest to you all. So we're going to do that, and then I'm going to speak for a little bit about activation and answer any questions you may have. But we're assuming, if you have questions on the report, please ask, but we won't be going through it as a bit by bit today. So I'll hand over to Mike to talk about commercial.
So you've obviously looked at the commercial landscape that we've put into the report. We thought we'd just give you a little bit of a highlight of some other projects that are actually either underway and where they're at, or ones that you're probably not aware of and where they are. It's been quite interesting to see the amount of projects that we actually have currently underway, and then some proposed ones that may or may not happen, and talking to some of the developers around and whether they're looking to do new projects or not. To give you an update, I had a meeting yesterday with 391 Victoria Street, the old Hellensteins building that's been completely redeveloped. It started off at something like a $5 million, it's now something like a $9 million project. That's now due for completion in October or November. I think everyone's looking forward to that. The Ronnie's Cafe building on Victoria Street opposite Sky City, that's being strengthened at the moment. That's due for completion in March. We had teed up a meeting last week between the landlord and potential tenant for the whole building. The Miller's Fashions building, which is 2 down from that, is quite an interesting one. The current owners of it have decided they're going to demolish it. It is earthquake prone. The consent, I believe the consent is actually back for 3 apartments at the rear, some car parking, and then at the front they're going to create a hospitality tenancy with a large light atrium. So that went out for tender. The tenders came back just before Christmas, so they can't be too far away from actually giving somebody the go-ahead to do that. We've got development and it will happen on the corner of Bryce and Barton Street where Specsavers are. The landlord there is looking to put he's bought the building next door where Kathmandu were, and he's looking to create a little bit of a precinct and an alleyway in there, put another level on top of the Specsavers building with a garden and things. Looks fabulous. He is planning on doing that towards the end of this year. The other one we've got is, and you may or may not have seen it, is Andrew Yeoman's got 2 developments going on at the moment in Vialoo Street. One is down at 1 Vialoo Street where he's building apartments without car parks. We see them around the world. It sounds like it will be targeted to the likes of, international students. It's close proximity to Wintec. Then he's doing another one slightly further down, 15 to 17, where the health board was. He's starting developing in there. But it is interesting talking to the residential developers specifically about their desire to do more, as in the future with the advent of the remission on DCs. Most of them now are saying, look, we think we should be looking outside the CBD. I think those remissions, talking to them, were actually really important in getting to the stage where we are. So it'll be interesting to see what that impact is. As I said, there's a lot of development going on at the moment in terms of the commercial space that is already underway. The developers that have been doing it, they've probably got enough on their hands. We're seeing the odd new developer coming in and looking at things, whether they will do things or not. We talked to Ian Castles about the IRD building. They're still undecided what they will do with that. They've said, look, it is likely to be, accommodation, but whether it will be a hotel, whether it will be student accommodation, or whether it will be apartments, we really don't know. They've got a couple of big projects going on in Wellington at the moment, but it'd be very interesting to see where that's going to lay and what the remission on development contributions in the CBD will do. I suspect it is going to have an impact, but at least we have projects currently underway.
Okay. Yep.
Thanks.
So just to follow on from Mike, looking at the, didn't push the button. Looking at the activation landscape, so obviously we've had this in place for the last few months and had the opportunity to bring our public spaces more to life. So there have been some definite learnings, that was for you, Mark, learnings around what's working in the space, improvements that can be made, but overall we're really happy with how the activation's going, and to have the opportunity to help community groups, businesses, collaborations, all happen within our public spaces and create more life. So just thought I'd run you through some of the material or the promos that we've had for some of the events, so that you can have a look at that, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So I'll just take you through this. So we had obviously River Riders, that's one of our, Electrify NZ, one of our businesses that we had the collaboration with. We've had artist markets, we've brought in ice skating rinks, we've collaborated with the library, with Hamilton City Council on different projects. Now I'm speed talking and it's not moving on. There we go. Round the Bridges, we had the opportunity to expand that event, which was fantastic, and added an extra day in there. Obviously, that's one of our larger, more iconic events. Embassy Park, this is going really well for movie nights, and depending on the movies, we've brought in entertainment if it's going to help the movie nights, such as for the Rocky Horror Picture Show. We had a flash mob come in and actually perform and interact with the audience while the movie was going on, which was fantastic. And same thing happened with Priscilla Queen of the Desert and Goodbye Pork Pie. We have a collaboration happening with Precious Metals and Centreplace, who are taking down 2 minis to have on display and for a charity run that they're doing. So these different events have allowed us to work with different groups, and it's going very well. So Embassy Park is getting well known for holding movie nights, which is great. And obviously Garden Place and Victoria and the River are probably the main event areas, and we had the opportunity to have the launch of the Pride Festival down there, Stories in the Garden, which sees superheroes and princesses every 2 weeks come into Garden Place. It's going very well. We did a product demonstration. We had a Business House Curling Cup that Mike's business participated in but didn't win, unfortunately. Yeah. But again, it was another collaboration. We had the Fringe Festival that went for 8 days around the 4 public spaces, which was fantastic, and got a lot of different people coming in and being part of that. We've had cultural groups represented with the Weed Cultural Market. We were able to work with the Hamilton City Council on providing a kids event leading up to Christmas, which is great. Paula and Civic Square, we had parkour, which was neat to see Civic Square able to be used. I'm just going to stop that, make sure it doesn't carry on. For something that was quite different, offering parkour and having a frame around there that the public were allowed to go in and learn how to do it, actually provided just quite a different opportunity that you don't expect to have in the central city. So yes, happy to answer any questions on either of the 2 topics, but we're genuinely delighted with how the activation is going.
Great. Angela, thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your report, Mike and Vanessa. So question just to Mike, just to clarify for me, you said that residential developers are now concerned about the increase of the removal of the remission policy, but you said that they are looking at working outside the city. Did you mean outside the CBD, still within the boundary, or outside Hamilton's
No,
boundary?
within Hamilton, but outside the
Okay,
CBD.
so outside the city.
Cost
And-
of land is less, it's those sort of land prices of, it's a very much a juggling act at the moment
Yeah.
between DCs and land prices
Yeah.
and construction costs.
And are you getting the same comment from commercial developers? I mean, you listed quite a few new developments happening with millers and things like that.
Probably not to the same degree. Certainly the residential, there's a little bit of pullback from the commercial developers. Yeah, because everything's going up, and as I said, construction costs
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
We're now doing new builds, and you look at a lot of the new builds now. They're talking sort of, they're saying, look, we need 350 to 400 a metre in terms of a rental for it, whereas that was sort of 300 a metre probably 18 months ago.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Now, so Vanessa, just couple of things. Page 42, I mentioned this last time about the pedestrian counts. I'd really like to see the data. I really want to see that information, not just have some commentary. Are we
Okay.
able to do that?
Yes, just to note, because the cameras were staggered put in over December, the best way to look at the data is when it's comparative, and we haven't had comparative because they hadn't been in for a whole year.
Okay.
So when you look at December, you can see, because otherwise it's just the data which is in isolation. That many people walked past that camera, and it doesn't really tell a story.
No, there's no trends data
No,
coming through.
so we were waiting for that year for that trending information. So that started with December. So just to throw some stats at you, for the first 2 weeks of December, there was a 10.2% increase in people compared to the previous year. And in the second 2 weeks, there was a 16% increase in people. So certainly we can graph that and show that going forward from now. But it has.
But how do you know that there was an increase if the...
No,
Because
so
December
the
allowed us
first
that data.
anniversary was December.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we've had it, they went in December 2017, so we could compare Decembers for 2017, 2018, and now we'll be able to compare January's, February. Yeah.
Okay, so is
they
that
actually will-
something that when you report to us, you can
we can
include
give-
in here?
yeah, like
Just some
a
high-level
dashboard
graphs?
graph
Yeah,
showing the different
Yeah.
numbers. So we'll probably do it by street.
yeah. On page 43, you mentioned, you talk about some other pipeline developments in the city, and one of them, you talk about the hotels and Violoo Street, etc. I'm familiar with those. I'm not familiar with the Hood Street development. What's that?
That's the former, it's where Hog's Breath Cafe was, in the demolition next to the car park building. Yeah, so we've got there's a potential tenant that's going through some negotiation at the moment, but there's a reasonable likelihood that will go ahead. Basically, retail ground floor, 2 levels of office.
Okay, cool. All right. I won't ask about the Garden Place plan that you're working on, other than possibly not for detail, because that'll be reported appropriately. But just you're happy with how that's tracking? You're still in charge?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, still tracking.
That's actually what my main question. Okay, so no, I just want to focus on the $100,000 for the activation plan. Thank you for including the list of activities. However, what the report doesn't provide me with is how we can actually see how the funding is being spent in relation to the principles that you set out in that activation plan, which was mainly predominantly people and business.
Business support.
Yeah, people was attracting more people, how you're going to manage and measure that. And the other one with the business was actually tackling business apathy.
Yeah.
So I need to see that in in the reports going forward linked to that $100,000 activation plan, because I think I made it quite clear I didn't want that $100,000 just to be sponsorship of events, so people come to you and you just sign checks. So I actually want to see how you're delivering on the strategy of your plan, because your plan was excellent.
Okay.
So maybe even if staff can help you work through that, so that we can have that as an ongoing report, would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ryan, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mike. Vanessa, it's a really good report and really insightful seeing those pipeline projects, and thanks for clarifying Hood Street. I was also wondering about that. Pretty cool to see that Tauranga was coming to or see the experience that you guys have had in the BID. Can you just maybe talk to that in terms of where they're at, how it went, their feedback?
So Tauranga is just having their city council is just assessing where they're at. They don't have a business improvement district. Their city attractiveness is predominantly through one person that's actually tied up in a contract with an advertising agency. So they were wanting to explore what we did versus what council did and how that could be wrapped up as a separate bid project. So they came and saw us. They went and visited a few different bids, and they've had many discussions with other people within Hamilton City Council as well. And in March, they're actually hosting a placemaking event and going to be talking further to how they're going to manage their central city and placemaking thereafter. So I'll be able to give you an update after I've attended that one.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Deputy Mayor Martin?
Thank you, Vanessa and Mike. Councillor Leary covered my questions off around the DCs and just, obviously the more and more anecdotal stuff we get and because it seems at the moment there's quite a lot of development still in the pipeline. Just something I don't quite see. Can you just update, when your foot traffic and your data and I guess how you break down, who are the difference between people who are coming into town to shop and I realise people are coming in for hospitality versus people who are now living, working there. Is there much?
There is statistical data that we get that is provided through Market View, so we can see the breakdown of what people are spending on. We can see the breakdown of where people are originating from.
Right.
50% of people are outside of the main town that people are spending. We can see that spending was up 23 million for the CBD based on 2017 compared to 2018. We can see the different sectors where that spend is. There's not that much, there hasn't been that much change between, sort of 40% on food and beverage and it goes down from there. But in terms of being able to talk to residential, it's within the confinements of the areas where the spend comes from.
The ones who live or work in the CBD and then shop, as against for ones for whom the CBD is a destination, as against going to the base or Chartwell.
I mean, there is some comparative data. I don't know if it'll wholly answer that question, but certainly it can pinpoint the where the person originates from for that spend, but probably not down to in a CBD accommodation.
You obviously you're tracking this, but the 2-hour free parking, is that potentially levelling the customer playing field versus if I go to the base Chartwell or CBD, the parking meter thing is not in my mind. I don't know how much information, as a draw card, as an incentive.
Again, it is one of those things that combined with the parking and the other elements that are happening within the CBD are all painting a great picture. And I certainly think that having the 2-hour free parking and the surveying we've done with our businesses, which was conducted during LTP time, were hugely in favour of it.
So you're hugely, in your role, both at HCAB, you're in favour of that parking deal continuing.
Yes.
And through the chair, because obviously what I'm looking for is the evidence that that's part of the package, I guess.
Yes, and I think it is part of the suite of things that the CBD has now. Mike and I frequently talk about there not being one silver bullet that is making the CBD great again, and all the rest of it. It's all these things lining up together. So it is the parking, it is the more people working in town, it is the businesses coming to town, it is the residential developments happening, it is the commercial developments happening, and as they all combine, the going forward, the picture of the CBD is getting better and better.
Okay, thank you.
And activation.
Yeah,
so
thanks very much. Thank you.
Point that out.
Thanks. Mark, please.
Thanks, guys, for your report. It's very exciting. With regards to the new buildings and those that are going in, Mike, are you getting much? I mean, obviously, it's great to see these buildings going up and people moving from building to building, but is there the demand? Are there the people to fill these new office spaces, etc., or are they moving from new place to new place?
No, we're seeing two elements come into the CBD. One is the small office occupier that was previously in the suburbs operating from home, whatever. So we're seeing consistent demand for that coming into the CBD. A lot of shared space users. But it was interesting. So I had two consultants come to me this week from Auckland. They've got a requirement for 700, for 1,200 and for 250.
Is people you're talking about?
The square metres of office
square metres,
space,
big pound, right.
wanting to come back into the CBD.
Great.
And I think that's really quite interesting. One of the examples we came up is Matt Stark over the last 7 years has refurbished over a hectare of office space in the CBD. All of the space was vacant previously, and all of the space where they came from has actually been backfilled.
Right.
So there's a consistent demand there now. We see tenants on a daily basis coming into the CBD.
Yep. Is there, and this might be sort of getting pretty close to the fence line of scope, but is there a kind of tenant, as like we can see the DHB's coming in, the regional council's coming in, and with respect, that's a pretty big organisation, but is there a kind of tenant that adds more vibrancy to the CBD?
It's pretty broad at the moment in terms of them wanting to come in. We're getting a lot of interest from the corporates. I know we've got Union Square, which is the Duncan and Ebbett. What is it? The Ebbett Holden site at corner of Anglesey, Hood, and whatever.
Alexandra.
They're targeting government departments and large corporates. I've spent quite a lot of time in Wellington trying to get those tenants to come here.
Yep.
And I think there's a greater appetite for it at the moment.
Okay.
And I think that will continue. There's greater demand for refurbished space at sort of 250 to 300 a square metre than the new build at 350 to 400.
Rightio.
So that might have an impact because we're getting pretty close to redeveloping the significant buildings we're able to, but if the tenant wants to come in, they might not have any choice. And it was the case with the ANZ centre down Grantham Street. ANZ came in there, they had no choice, so they wanted 1,000 square metres.
Right.
They had to go there and pay the premium because there were no other options.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
cool.
but we've got a large shared space operator looking at Hamilton at the moment. There was a meeting in Australia with them last week. We understand they will be coming here within the next sort of 12 to 18 months. So that's a really big positive, I think.
That is really good. Okay, great. Thank you. And Vanessa, just regards some of the events that are coming in. Now, I've been to a fair few of these, and some were really well attended, and some of them you could park a bus in, even if it did come across a red light and through. How do you judge whether something's worth or has worked or not? Like I think in particular the Pride Festival. That was the right thing to hold, but it was a pretty spacious event, if you like.
It was a pretty spacious event. The Pride Festival is something that hadn't been outdoors in Hamilton before. And certainly those new events are great to participate in, to see if they can be built up over time. It wasn't a huge investment, but actually if you came down during that time when it was on, Garden Place was absolutely, it was so incredibly colourful, it was loud, it was vibrant.
You just didn't have any people in it.
Well, it had the people that were actually going to be at that Pride Festival later on, but it didn't actually have that foot traffic of people coming across it or people actually being here. Possibly a bit to do with timing, but to me the minimal cost for the impact of seeing that colour and having people come into the office the following week and ask about it and having seen it was, I think, made sense to do it without being a huge outlay.
Okay.
So different events, we'll absolutely judge it on whether they're new, expanding. As a general rule, we're trying to put in place things like not investing in events that already exist because they're already here. And so we're trying new things or expansion events on what already exists.
Yeah.
And again, trial and error, lessons learned, all of that sort of thing.
No silver bullet.
No silver bullet. And it is one of those things. As we go along, we'll look at an event, make judgment calls on what we think it can do or whether it's the right thing to be involved in. Cool. And some pan out better than others.
Cool, thank you. And just one more if
we think it's important to bring people that may not have been into the CBD for some time in, so therefore having a variety of events You know, we're better to bring a new person in each time than have 100 of the same people there all the time.
Yeah, I
So
hear
that's a really big,
Yeah, I think it's
Draw card.
a draw
That's
card.
good to hear.
And the diversity angle. You know, it is actually great to have different looking events.
So it's more than
and-
just the numbers, basically.
Yeah,
so-
yeah,
okay.
absolutely. And the numbers aren't always going to pan out.
Yep.
Like, I'm under no illusion that, you know, the per capita spend is not always going to be there.
Yeah, of
But
course.
actually, some of the social benefit, I think, is worth more
Right.
and, you know, can't have that same price put on it.
Okay, thank you. And just, if I can just look at page 48, some of the numbers here. Those $10,000 spends to Creative Waikato, are they the Tasty Tunes things? Was that, can you just flesh that out for me, please?
That is a multitude of events that, so with Creative Waikato moving into Garden Place, it made sense to actually see if they could take some of their indoor things and take them out onto Garden Place. Tasty Tunes is one example of that. So every Thursday they will have a different artist that is performing on Garden Place, on that end of Garden Place, and you know, as a lunchtime performance, but it also includes two, so there was an agreement between us of what they would do. There's also two major festivals that will be included with that as well.
Okay.
And one of them is a Buskers Festival that is currently being worked through now that will also be happening in Garden Place. And then there is another one that I don't want to say too much on yet because
Okay.
the details aren't fleshed out. But so it was to basically for them to take their internal, perhaps what were more internal business elements and put them
Right.
outside.
Because am I right, they've got 20 grand of the spend, is that right? So
Yes.
that's money well spent? Yep.
Yes.
Great.
Yep. In terms of their natural crowd that they can draw on to bring in here.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks. James, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Vanessa and Mike, for the good work that HCBA do around the city here. It's great. Look, storefront occupancy. Have you noticed the rate for that in the CBD improving? Is it static or is it declining?
Hang on, Grace.
in terms of retail, the report should be out within the next week, so you're the first to know. So it's gone from 6.3% vacancy in retail to 6.2%. So there's a small, what we have noticed is that the figures are slightly distorted because the ones that are vacant are actually large format space. You know, there's a number of them on Bryce Street, for example, there's about 3 or 4 there that really sort of distort them. But I think 6.3 is pretty close to the lowest we've ever had. Office space, we think we'll see a similar sort of trend. That's probably about a month away. But everything's trending the right way.
Okay. Secondly, with the buildings around town and everything else, the big iceberg we've had here in the central city for a while, above Quadrant.
Yep.
Have we got any end date for that?
Yeah, so that's October, November.
Yeah.
It's been pushed out. It's just started and literally snowballed. And the problem's just got bigger and bigger. They said the budget's almost doubled from what they originally thought it was going to be. And I actually was talking to the Quadrant tenants and it's been quite a major for them, but they all agree it will be great for the city when it's done. You'll get better quality tenants in the apartments. People enjoy living there. It'll be really good. But yeah, October, November.
Yeah, it's good because it has really affected the Quadrant business. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, that's
Safety in the central city. Well, there's been a lot more police presence in the CBD of late, which is good to see. And I'm just wondering to know if you would agree that the incidence of vagrancy or the people hanging around has actually been less. Because I've noticed that myself. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yes, definitely. Certainly, it seems to be, like you say, that the less of perhaps the people that we would know, less of that, and there has been an increase in police presence, and it is a dedicated resource increase through town, which has been fantastic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think they're getting a little bit of pressure on them, so they're moving out of the suburbs now. Lastly, the collaboration projects, Garden Place. I was a little bit surprised to see that there. Do you see this as with the design and everything being a partnership, collaboration with somebody, or solely HCC funded? Because in the 10-year plan, council got roasted for even considering another revamp of Garden Place.
yes, so this was further to an earlier meeting that I came to and talked about working with 3 of the architects in town, with Mike and I, to come up with a design for Garden Place, not a council-funded design, but actually a look that we're anticipating bringing back to council in April. Yes, I agree, it's a hotly contentious area, but it certainly wasn't to come back to council to ask for funding. It was to come back with a brand new collaborative design.
Okay, that'll be interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, could you bring it back a month earlier in October, during the election campaign? No. Paula, thanks.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just a couple of quick short ones. In respect, it was fantastic to see the inner city development happening closer into the CBD centre than I necessarily anticipated. My question is, especially around the residential apartments, are the developers reporting any particular barriers to you? Or are they finding it quite a permissive environment in which to work, and they're sort of reaping the benefits while they can? Because I know they're planning some really good things from what you've said. It's excellent. But I would imagine they might say something to you if they have some grumbles or gripes.
I think there are a couple of a lot of it comes back to cost to them. They all tell us that it's construction cost, it's land cost, it's DCs and how the emission works. So that's one part of it. There are some comments from several developers, and a good example, as I understand, is the Toyota site. A number of the other developers said, well, hold on, how are they allowed to develop a site where residential is non-conforming on the ground floor, and yet there's no commercial element in that building?
Right.
And also the quality, you know, they've all said, look, we really don't see the CBD, it shouldn't have Kiwi build. There is some talk that there will be, that site may be Kiwi build. And I agree with them, it's probably not the greatest look that we want necessarily in the CBD. So those are the two things, it's just getting some consistency around design, urban design panel, and what is allowed on the ground floor, and then the quality of the development, and are we allowing Kiwi build within the CBD?
And can you elaborate on what you're hearing about the development contributions?
So there obviously the development contributions are being, it was 100%, we're now at 2/3,
Yes.
July this year, it'll fall to 1/3. So those have an impact on the economics of any development. And again, with the other increasing cost of development and land construction, it's all making it pretty marginal for them. And they're saying, look, it's probably easy to do it somewhere else. You know, there's a lot of, you look at Frankton, you look at some of the new suburbs, and they're saying that just might be easier for us to deal with.
Because for a start, the land is cheaper.
The land is cheaper. Yeah, construction's no different. And it's easier to build on a site where you don't have a building immediately next door, for example. It's just easier to develop, more cost effective.
Yeah, okay.
So also the development that is looking great now, and the pipeline projects, they have all been things that have been on the go, well before the DC
Right.
decision came in.
So it's hard to know whether the new DC
Well,
decision is pushing people forward or
I
back.
think it will be quite a different looking landscape in 2 years' time.
I don't think we've seen a land sale for residential development in the last 6 months in the CBD, and yet before that there was a host of it.
Okay, that's
And
interesting to
continued
know.
demand from the developers, what have you got, what else can we get onto? I don't think we've seen one in the last 6 months.
Okay, thank you. That's really useful information I didn't have, so I appreciate that. Just in respect to and well done on the CBD Celebration Awards last year. What a fantastic night in that building. Are any of the, 2 more short questions, bear with, are you having any conversations about heritage-type projects with any of the developers or shop owners who have historic frontage or any?
I've had a couple of conversations over the last couple of years, and it does tend to be about what costs they're going to incur, or the fact that they've got to follow certain rules and regulations, and but nothing in terms of determining any action one way or another.
Okay, yeah, because they did a very good job on the corner of Ward Street, of course, above the...
Fantastic. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, it's really good. The last question, just the ambassador program in terms of a collaboration. I see your you've got it starting in February, completed in May. Will we get some more detail around that? I'm uncertain of, other than the concept and what you're doing, I'm uncertain about it. I think it sounds like a really good idea, by the way. Excellent idea to have ambassadors. Some of our councillors have been talking about that for some time. But what it looks like, how it's going to operate, what are the benefits? Will we get some further information on that? Or
Yes, absolutely. So a couple of things. We've already got access to videos that they've done in other towns. So certainly if anyone wanted me
I would like to see
send
that,
on
yeah.
some of that, happy to do so. Queenstown Resort College will be coming in middle of February to start planning what that looks like and who's going to speak. So at this stage we've had an initial round table group discuss, talk through different elements that need to be included, and then from February they'll be coming in to actually flesh out what that's going to look like.
Okay, thank you
But,
very
yeah, so I'm happy to send those.
Yeah, I would
videos
like to
on
see
for
that.
now.
I would like to understand more about that. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob, please.
Just following on from Councillor Paula's comments about the DC, and having regard, Mike, to your very strong professional standing in this area, do the developers think of, demand for residential sites in the city being, commanding a bit more of a premium than, say, one in Frankton? And then, quite clearly land will cost more. DCs haven't cost anything up until now, but are starting to impact on that sort of cost. We get a bit of rhetoric feedback, but somebody in your position, you obviously see the real results of whether or not that decision by us was a good or a bad decision in terms of our wish to enhance the CBD.
I think we're seeing you talk to the developers and there are certain price points, depending on number of bedrooms that they can get to. Once it goes beyond that price point, due to whatever other costs they're going, look, we're getting a bit of pullback here. You do look at Andrew Yeoman's one at 1 via Lou Street where he's not putting any car parks, so therefore the cost of construction, the land costs, means that he is going to have to develop more intensively, and if that land might have been car parking, it's now not, he's prepared to sort of take that punt on it. There does seem to be a consistent, there's a newer demand, and I look at the BCD one opposite the old Founders, that would be the best quality one we've seen. That's gone really well since the scaffolding came down. I think there might only be one left. That's gone really well, and it's a different price point. Yep. So I think there is a demand there for that, and another one of a similar sort of, but nobody seems prepared to do it. And it is that combination of the other costs in there. So I think if they're attracting different parts of the market, sectors.
Because that's a buy situation, isn't it? Yep. As opposed to a rentals. Do we have significant rental? Is the demand for rentals high in that CBD? With perhaps the other development.
It looks like about 2/3 of them are probably rentals and 1/3 of them are owner occupiers. Yep. The BCD one is probably the other way around. It's probably 2/3 would be owner occupier and only 1/3 would be tenanted. It is interesting. The type of tenants they're actually getting for the new builds are actually quite good types of tenants. They tend to often be corporate or business people within the CBD. So that's got to be a good thing.
Do you have some advice for us on how we could monitor, the potential impact of the removal of the DCs in terms of being able to be nimble enough to respond if we think it's not achieving the outcome that we set ourselves to achieve when we did the CCTP? Yeah,
and I think you'll see that coming through in your building consents. I think if you look at the building consents of what we've seen in the last 3 years and what you might have seen in the last, I think that's a good indicator. Yep. And that's probably really going to be the best way to view it. Yep. And it may be different. I think we might see a little bit of, 2 or 3 level buildings, and a good example is probably the Opus building on the corner of Harwood and Princes Street, which has been bought by Jeff Downey. He was originally going to convert it all to residential. That was his first thought. Then he got some other advice from someone and said, no, just turn it all to office. He's now looking and probably most likely to consider a mixed use in it. So there'll probably be potentially retail and office ground floor, a couple of levels of office, and then maybe 3 levels of apartments of different qualities. But I think you'll see that carry on. But the new builds, yeah, I think the best way is look at your, you know, your building consents.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And just one quick question, Vanessa, on the numbers working in the city. And I'm not sure whether we were doing that in the past or you were, but we were getting a regular stat as to the numbers of workers in the CBD, and I know there's been movements with IRD moving and then DHB coming in and potentially Waikato Regional Council. Is it possible we could plot something going forward in terms of those numbers, maybe with a graph that might take us back to pre-CCTP, so we get an idea of how those numbers are going? Because while the foot traffic is important, the numbers working in the CCTP will also be important. And I'm not sure whether that's your job or our responsibility.
I'm happy to look into that. So we've previously got the numbers from council.
Okay, okay.
Just to be able to use them.
But it'd be quite good to have that, even if it's reported by you and by us.
Councillor, there is going to be a briefing in the next few months, I don't have the exact date on me, around development in the CBD, so we can make sure that that is one of the pieces of information we put forward.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Norm, thank you.
Kia ora, ngā mihi kia kōrua, acknowledgements to you too, ngā mihi kaiti mō o mahi, acknowledgements to your good work. He pātai poto tēnei, just a quick question. Where does cultural narratives, traditional history and heritage and Indigenous design principles and or framework fit within the development and events that you lead?
So I'll take the events one. So we have been going out and basically talking to as many groups and people as possible to see what we can do in terms of events and having different groups and cultures and styles of events represented in the CBD. So that's an ongoing, piece of work that we have going, and yeah, happy to talk you through separately any contacts that you may want us to make contact with. But we are constantly out there talking to people and ensuring that we can have as much diverse representation as possible with our events.
Yeah, and I think from a building perspective as well, and every developer is different, but I think there's a much greater awareness of consulting and talking to the right people. Yeah, it seems to be reasonably consistent. I think, you know, Tainui, with what they've done, you look at the hoardings, for example, on the corner of Ward and Victoria, it's just highlighted greater awareness. I know the people that bought the public trust building down 610 Victoria Street, they went in a great deal of background in talking to the right people about that site and what had gone on, and I think there's plaques going up and things like that. So I think it's just a greater awareness, but it's nothing particular.
Thanks. Jeff, please.
Yeah, look, very quickly, because I don't want to prolong this big questioning session, but I'll just preface my question by congratulating you on the work you're doing. I love the activation thing. I think everybody just feels good about it, and it's tremendous. And well done to the councillors who championed that during the LTP, I think. I've seen Garden Place full, well, quite full a few times now, thanks to some of these events that are going on. Does it in any way kind of change your or others that you're working with perception about what needs to be done in Garden Place? I mean, there was this kind of thing that it was broken because it was always empty, but I mean, I'm seeing people in there enjoying themselves. You know, does it really need a redevelopment?
Do you know, I think it's one of those, and it probably brings in a bigger picture of the CBD. In terms of look, feel, maintenance, that sort of thing, you put Victoria and the river up against Garden Place, and the difference is phenomenal in terms of a look and feel. Garden Place doesn't look like a high-end development or a great CBD development. When there's people in there, you wouldn't know. And don't get me wrong, I think activation goes a long way toward helping make that space look great. But if you look at it as a destination area to sit down and eat your lunch, would you rather sit there or would you rather eat at Victoria on the River? And I would be surprised if, when there's nothing happening in Garden Place, if your choice would be there. And I think that actually goes to a bigger issue around the city keeping up with modern times. I mean, you look at, and I know I do labour this point, but some of the infrastructure elements we've got in the city, the seating is dreadful, and it's highlighted in Garden Place, where you've got these rickety old brown seats that just do nothing to enhance that space. And you look at rubbish bins, again, are they placed in the best possible place to make the spaces usable? You know, I think it's more than just saying when people are in it, it looks okay, or it looks great when you've got activation happening. There is, I think, a look to the CBD that there are certain elements that should be continuously upgraded to keep it looking like a modern, vibrant city, and there are definite aspects that haven't kept up with that. So, yeah.
Okay.
That's my roundabout answer there.
It's got to continue to evolve. You can't go, it was fine 5 years ago, therefore it's good for today. The city, streetscape, space, everything has to continue to evolve.
So that sounds like a $500,000 upgrade rather than a $3 million, $4 million upgrade.
I think it's a bigger picture as well. Like, I'm talking, footpaths and all of those sorts of things, I think, need to have that attention and spotlight put on them. In terms of the numbers, I can't say what they are.
Okay.
But I do think some spotlights need to be put on areas of the CBD that don't look modern.
Okay. We had a submitter at the start of the meeting mention the movie nights at Embassy Park, which I hear are really successful, and just ask whether or not it would be worth having the opportunity for people to purchase alcohol there. Have you thought about this? Is this an option? Are we grown up enough as a city to do that?
So in terms of trying to get alcohol in public places in Hamilton, the experience I've had so far hasn't been great.
In what way?
In that it's not a space that there is the want to do that. So I have looked into, or I've had events where I've tried to have it considered in Garden Place and at Victoria and the River, and it was going to be quite the process with probably not a positive outcome. I was given that.
Right, so that the council's blocking that?
I think there's probably a whole view in terms of alcohol licence and all the contributing parties around why they shouldn't be given as opposed to why they should be given. So, It's not an easy process to go through in Hamilton, or certainly in the CBD.
Okay. Is it worth pursuing or not?
I'm happy to pursue it. Do I think that we'll get the outcome that would give us an alcohol licence in a public place? I would be surprised. I'd be delighted to be surprised. But yeah, it is quite the process.
Okay, thanks.
But happy to make it a test option for a movie night and see where it goes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Gary, please.
Thank you. Mike, I think you've both talked about shared spaces. Can you just expand on what shared spaces means versus retail versus residential versus commercial?
Shared space is quite different, and we actually went and had a look at a Biz Dojo site up in Auckland. I can't remember who they're now purchased by.
A what?
They're called Biz Dojo. They're one of the largest providers in Australasia. But it's very much a collaborative space, and it's a combination of people walking in, plugging their laptop and working that may come into the CBD and work for an hour or two a day, or they may come here 1 day a week. Then you've got a combination of secure areas, may house anywhere from 1 to 10 people, which is separate. Access to shared office meeting rooms and boardrooms. There's a little phone care. It's just a very interactive space for people that don't want to be committed necessarily to long-term leases, but they want the access to the amenities within the CBD. And they normally pay a bit of a premium for that ability not to be locked into, for example, a 6-year lease term. They're happy they may only have a 3 or 6 month commitment. But it will bring a lot of people into the CBD who may not otherwise be here.
Okay, so what are the implications in terms of the person building that? So what are they,
It's actually quite interesting. Wallace Developments, as an example, did a big one in the Hawke's. Wallace Developments.
Oh, yep.
So I've done quite a few buildings around the CBD. They did a big one in Hawke's Bay, and I know initially the banks were very reluctant because there's no lease tenure there. But what they discovered is that the cash flow from it, and that it was always 90% full, the banks are now quite happy to look at that scenario for them. So they are more difficult to get across the line because you don't have that tenure of lease. But the cash flow is so good on them. But you've got to have good proven operators for them. Stark Property have got 3 at the moment. The one over the road on the corner of Garden Place and Worley.
Panama Square.
Yeah, Panama Square.
Panama Square, Panama House. and
Panama Cottage.
Panama Cottage.
But Panama Square, which will be completed in March, is already full. And I just think that shows you what the demand is. We're also seeing a few tenants that may traditionally have, and we've just, a good example is one that said, look, do you know what, we don't really need an office in Hamilton anymore. They had probably 130 square metres, said we might just go back to Tauranga. They've actually now taken place in Panama Square and said, look, this actually works for us. There's not a lot of risk, but no, we're quite happy to remain here and have a formal presence.
so do they normally have car parking?
Probably not required. Some of them do, but I think there's not an expectation that if I'm just having a hot desk that I have a car park. If I come into town, as long as I can get into a car park building that's accessible, that pretty much suits the requirement for it. You will always get the odd one that will want a car park or two, and we've managed to wangle a few things there, but not an expectation.
So it's a move away from a fixed tenancy to a floating sort of tenancy type scenario?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So we've had experience, so Hamilton hasn't had so much experience with this sort of scenario, is that right? So how long has this mode of building been going for?
They're actually saying there's some articles that were written, they're saying within the next sort of 10 to 15 years, up to 40% worldwide, and it was an American article, could be shared space. So we've probably had it, Panama House started probably 2.5 years ago down Grantham Street.
Yep.
So we've had a bit, you used to traditionally have the serviced office suites, which are a very, they were generally done to a pretty poor quality, straight suspended ceilings, not really very vibrant. So we've had those for a long time. They've fallen out of favour as to more collaborative space. They have a nice coffee type area within them that you can meet clients or you can talk to someone else. But yeah, it's really, I think, especially with this big operator looking to come to Hamilton, that's showing us some confidence, one, in the model, and secondly, that we want to be in Hamilton.
Are they sort of amenable to being mixed use? Like, is there residential is involved as well?
Traditionally, they're not.
Okay.
But
retail?
Retail, yeah, you could. Yeah.
So it's retail on the bottom and then...
And they're generally on an upper floor. I don't...
Which will be the Panama.
Which will be Panama there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll have retail on the bottom. I mean, the other great one's Wintec, Soda.
Yeah, Soda. Soda's a great...
Yeah, I'm familiar with Soda,
absolutely.
yeah, so that's
fantastic.
Yeah, so you get the ones that are we own the building, we'll develop it as shared space like Stark Property, and then you get like Soda, who's quite happy to be a tenant. You look at the one coming to Hamilton, quite happy to be a tenant. So, yeah, we're seeing a variety of models come in.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Mayor Andrew, please.
So I just want to go back to the DC issue on apartments and the land selling for apartments, and your comment about sales slowing down over the last 6 months.
Yep.
And I just want to ask you if you think that there's more things affected than just the DCs, and what's happened to property land prices in the CBD over the last couple of years leading up to this, because surely that must have an effect. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there are two things, and you're right, it's not just about DCs, it is about, as I said, construct land prices. I suppose it's the one element that in the equation a council can help control to get development. Yeah, and we've seen it, land value in a lot of, a good example is the one via Lou Street, which I would have said probably 4 years ago would have been worth probably, 3, maybe 400. We sold it, I think, probably 2 years ago, and it was about 500 a metre, 600 a metre. The Yeoman Development's paid over 1,000 a metre for it. So it's had a massive increase in values. Yeah, will that continue? I think it's got to a stage now where it can't. With construction costs, and that's one you've got no control over, it is what it is. Yeah, land prices are going to have to come back, or, council are going to need to look at DCs and the impact on that.
So you've just said that prices have pretty well tripled over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it's for poor land. Good sites haven't been the same degree, but the poor stuff within the CBD that is suitable for residential development it's been pretty close to tripled.
So we know it's a balance between price points and what it costs, which DC is reflected in, and what you can get for the apartment when you're finished. So we take DCs back off again.
Yeah.
Then is it possible that land prices will go up again to compensate that?
I think it's got to a fine line where a developer says, look, here's the equation, I can't make it work. If they come back, I think vendors for land I think they recognise that things have probably got a little bit out of kilter, and hopefully their expectations might even come down a little bit as well. So hopefully it's twofold, because if the equation doesn't work, they don't develop.
And a big part of that equation is land value.
Land value is a reasonable part of it, and land value and DCs.
Yep.
Well, they're all probably equally. It'd be interesting to see what the exact mix is, but they've all had, big impacts on it, and it's just that it's happened threefold.
Okay, and just while I'm here, Vanessa, thank you for your leadership. It's impressive.
Thanks. And one final really quick question for a second go, Angela.
Yeah, just one question, and I'll move the report when you're ready. I just wanted to ask how the audit of spaces under the activation plan is going. Has that been completed?
How the what,
The
sorry?
audit of spaces. So staff were going to work with you to audit the spaces, following on from Councillor Taylor's line of questioning.
No, that hasn't happened yet.
So can I ask staff why that hasn't happened? We're 6 months into this long-term plan. So this audit of spaces, I'm assuming, was to look at the very things that Councillor Taylor was raising and you were talking about around the infrastructure, the seating, what's going to need to be repaired soon, next year, the year after, and how much it's going to cost. Who's in charge of that? Jen?
I'll follow that up with the appropriate people.
Yeah, can you come back to me and give me the answer to that as well,
all of us.
please? Or to all of us, sorry, yeah.
Yep, certainly.
Thank you.
Can that also include a site plan of the spaces?
Yeah.
Talk, you two talk. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Moved by Angela, the staff recommendation that the committee receive the report. I'll second. Those in favour? Oh, all right, yep.
I just want to, look, I know it's lunchtime, but look, I've always been an incredibly strong supporter, and I want to thank you, Vanessa, and Mike, and Vicky, for the work that you do. It was great to celebrate your 10th year in December. I enjoyed that. I can't believe it's been 10 years, actually. I was on the inaugural board, and it feels like it's only a couple of years ago. I want to commend you on growing the organisation into the strong supporter and influencer of the CBD that you are. You should be very, very proud of that. Thank you.
Thanks. Deputy Mayor Martin.
Just briefly, obviously incredibly valuable presentation report, and obviously, questions be it about DCs, free parking, the whole sort of mix of tools that are needed out there in terms of reinvigorating the CBD. But I just obviously want to thank you for the depth of analysis and appreciate that, and obviously all the work that you guys and your team are doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Paula.
Thank you. I just am really keen to keep an eye on the movement of land within the CBD as well, so I support the comments of others in that respect, in particular the sale and purchase of land, and what developers do with that, because we have a number of things in place that we hope will be successful, but it's too soon to say where that's all going. I'm particularly interested in the trend around residential on the fringe of the CBD and the typology of that accommodation. Yes, there could be some for students, international students, local students for Wintec, etc. But are we getting any shift of urban professionals or coming into high-end town apartments?
No, no questions. We were in speeches now.
It's a rhetorical question in debate.
Okay.
Too. So, yeah, that's what I'm interested in. It's not just what we get in the city; it's the quality of the change as well, to me, so that we build a city that's actually fabulous to live downtown in. But well done for the work you've got underway. And I'm really keen on that ambassador program. I know Councillor Bunting talked about ambassadors when he first was elected and how important it is to have people selling the city. I agree with that sentiment.
Thanks. I'm going to put the resolution to a show of hands. Those in favour, the hands against. That's it's all carried. You're just slow, not against. Okay. Thanks very much, Vanessa and Mike. A lot of interest in the report as usual. Great. Okay, we're going back to, and Councillor O'Leary, sorry, we're not waiting for lunch. You haven't done anywhere near enough work to get lunch yet. So we're going back to the GM's report, page 22, Footpath Renewal Program Update, which Robin is going to lead off on. Page 22. There we are. Robin.
Thank you, Councillor Dave. So Footpath Renewals Program, we had a significant increase in footpath renewals budget into this 10-year plan. Should actually be a 400% increase, noted in 51. But this is just a quick update on the work that we have been doing with that, and to build upon the executive updates that we've been providing to councillors with regard to the activities of the scooter man, for example, and making sure that we are targeting that work to the risk areas and that we have a good understanding of what the condition of our assets are out on the network. Obviously, great advantage in having someone be able to get quickly around our whole footpath network in the city, not only picking up the faults in the footpath, but also things like missing covers and water leaks, etc. There is some information for councillors in attachment 2 to this report, just giving you an idea of the intervention levels that we currently deal with and how we act on those, so that the high level faults, the most important ones, the P5s, we are getting out and looking at closely and making sure that we either can put a permanent fix in place, or that in some cases we can do a temporary fix. So that might be something like grinding a bit of concrete to get rid of the trip hazard, so that it can then get picked up in subsequent work. And happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much. It's terrific we've got around so much of the city so quickly to get really nimble, literally. Well, as far as wheels go, nimble. Okay, James, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Robin, and thank you, Lisa, as well, because you've done a lot of work on these footpaths. Does Scooter Man actually have a name?
Or is it a different Scooter Man?
I'll just refer to Mike. He does have a name.
Chair, sorry, the operator's just changed, so I'm not too sure who the new operator is, but I can certainly find out later.
Yes, 28. So he's found 28,000 faults in that time. That's
Yes.
incredible.
Yes.
So okay, how many? With that, we've had a few accidents. I know of 4 that have been reported to me, and 3 of them involved with fractured wrists and broken ribs. And one was an elderly lady in West Hamilton who had facial and head injuries after tripping on a path. So one was in Galloway, one was in Harry Pookie. And I had a phone call from a very irate woman who happened to be my wife, who fell over and broke her wrist and her 2 ribs as well doing it. But have we had any more than that? So I know of 4 persons that have been reported, and Eva-Lisa got those fixed pretty quickly, which is really appreciated. Have there been any more than that?
I can't comment on that because I don't deal with those frontline, but we certainly do respond quickly to any that we do get. And I think the advantage of this is it's given us a proactive get out there and deal with it, so we don't actually have to wait for people to fall over or ring in with those problems. So that's been the advantage of doing the Scooter Man work.
It's fantastic. Thank you for your work.
Thanks. Rob, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, I'm pleased we've got this healthy budget of $4.5 million. How much have we spent to date of that $4.5 million?
I'm again going to catch up with, we are working very quickly through this year's program. The actual expenditure to date, I can't give you that answer straight off.
Will we spend the $4.5 million
This year? Yes.
this year?
Yes, we're programmed and we're making really good progress on the delivery of that program.
Okay, and just a question that you might not be able to answer, but the accountants in the room might, or Chris might. Is this work that we do on the footpath, is that all revenue expense, which means that it gets expensed in our financial statements rather than capitalised and then depreciated?
So it's a mixture. So the dollars referred to a capital, so it's a renewal program. But there are operational expenses as well in maintaining the footpath. But the increase in funding is a capital expense in our renewal program.
So even if a piece of concrete has moved and you have to straighten it up or replace it or repair it, that is a renewal rather than a repair to an existing footpath?
Look, it's a really good question, and I'll probably get judged by these.
I'm sorry,
guys in the audience,
but maybe it's something we could answer.
It's a judgment call in terms of the repair and whether it's indicative of a longer length of footpath. So they would probably look at the faults and the proximity of them and maybe identify a longer length of footpath to do, which will be renewal. If it's an isolated incident, it might just be a maintenance repair. So Mike can add to that.
Thanks, Mike.
It typically depends on the density of faults and failures in the surrounding area. If we have an isolated fault on a footpath, that would come out of non-capital budget, so it'll be a maintenance spend. Anything where we have a density or we can get a longer length of footpath renewed, that would come out of the renewal budget. Each site is treated on its own merits.
Okay. So if it's renewal, is it depreciated over a long number of years, or and again, I'm not sure whether we have all those answers here, but I'm just looking at, I'm looking at our balancing the books year-to-date figures and comparing it to our budget in the long-term plan, and we seem to be just miles out in terms of...
We're getting outside the scope of this.
Okay, but this is the time when these...
Maybe we can identify it to be answered in the next committee.
Yeah.
Chair, can I pick up the issue, because it's probably relevant to our capital financial report, so I can pick up the issue.
Yep, and bring it to finance.
And bring it to finance committee.
Yep, thank you for that. Yep.
Thanks. Mark.
Thank you. I'm just looking at page 32, and like James, I get phone calls about footpaths a wee bit, and I'm just a little bit. I wonder if you could sort of calm my stressed mind about the fact that we're only going to monitor the ones in the bottom left, the P3 acceptable ones, because that seems to be the nature of the ones I get caught with, and generally with elderly people who can't lift their feet so much, they tend to trip over those and they can't see them as well. I'm just a little bit worried that we're just monitoring those rather than fixing them, and I know you can't fix everything at once.
So I guess that is the difficulty we have. We've had a significant increase in funding, which is allowing us to get on and work very quickly through our P4s and 5s. The P3s are the ones that we do need to keep an eye on. This has to do with levels of service, and 15 mils has been determined as being an acceptable one. I myself know that 15 mils is something I trip over, but I can trip over something a lot less as well. So it is difficult, and I think that at least with the scooter man, what we've been able to do is really pick up where those P3s have actually got worse, so that we're keeping a good close eye on them through that process.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
having inspectors physically go out and try and look at them. We weren't keeping up with that.
Because it's more than just plastering it up, isn't it? It's also taking out tree roots, etc.
Yes, so often there's additional work that needs to be done in the area, and it could be as a result of adjacent development and all sorts of things that result in trip hazards occurring in the footpath. So that's the sort of work that we've got to try and keep on top of.
So if they are lifting because of tree roots and you have to take out trees nearby, does it come out of the same budget?
I understand that there was an increase in the Parks and Open Spaces budget specifically to align with the fact that we had an increased footpath renewals program to allow for that sort of work to work hand in hand.
Okay, and are the kind of complaints you're getting from councillors or residents, are they matching up with your risk assessment there? Like, are you not getting too many of those lifted?
Correct.
P3s?
Yep, yeah.
So,
I think there's also, it's one of those things that people probably, when there are there has been an incident and there's newspaper articles or Facebook or that sort of thing, people become more aware of it and actually have a look at where they're walking, and so, we do certainly get people reporting more of those hazards when they're out and about, when it's a topic of interest.
Okay, thanks, Robin. Thank you.
Thanks. Gary, please.
Thank you. The bit of paving that I'm most familiar with is one just down here, because that's between my office and here. That's all cobbles.
Correct.
Are we, going forward, going to be cobbling any footpaths from now on?
No, so actually as part of this renewal program, we've actually been removing the cobbles in the Frankton Commerce area, for example.
Fantastic.
So it's something that there are locations where it's appropriate. The difficulty we have down here is that we've got vehicles running on it, and
but we knew that.
yes, that's right. Yeah. So it's certainly not.
Because there are parts of it down here that are like walking on quicksand.
Yes.
Gary, we have had that discussion before about cobbles versus seal.
Yeah.
No, and we've had a response and decisions by council to have basically replaced with seal with almost decorative strips of cobbles occasionally to denote that it's a footpath, and that's been a discussion and decision.
So going forward, we won't see any new cobbles coming into town, into the city.
I can't guarantee that 100% because sometimes developers are very keen to put cobbles areas in. The Rototuna Town Centre, for example, is likely to see some cobbles in there.
So that's a situation where the council will then vest, those cobbles will be vested in us to maintain and...
Yes, and that's where we have conversations, understanding that there are increased maintenance costs for that. For example, out in Temple View, we've got an agreement there with that they've installed a higher standard than what we believed was necessary or were in a position to maintain, and so we have an agreement there with them sharing the additional costs as a result of that. So they're the sorts of agreements that we can move into.
So what you're just talking about Rototuna, you're aware that the developer's putting cobbles down?
I understand that that's part of the design. I'm not directly involved in that project at the moment.
Okay, so who will make sure that the cobbles that are put down are properly fixed and stable, or the developer's told that he can't put cobbles down?
Can I pick that as an issue? So I think it's a development issue and our technical specifications. So look, it's a good point, and until now I hadn't really focused on that, but I think it's a good point. So could I pick that up and find out an answer to that and report back somehow on that?
So will that answer include the standards that we say to people, if you're going to put cobbles, they have to be of, and I don't know what standards you have, but there has to be a standard that's not going to be quicksand in 5 minutes.
So leave it with me. My first port of call would be our technical specifications and what we say is allowable, and then it might generate a debate back to council about that issue and what we'd like to see.
The concern is we've sort of known that cobbles were going to wobble for a long, long time, and we seem to have never addressed it and just let it keep going.
Yep, so look, I think we've picked up that issue because, as the chair said, it was a debate around this table about 12 months ago, and we're certainly not in our program renewals putting in cobbles. We've gone to Nashfield as per Commerce Street, but it's a good debate because I don't think we've quite captured the development community invested assets. So let me pick that up and report back.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, councillors, move on to LED street lights. You doing that too, Robin?
Yes, I am. So the LED program is progressing really well. We've done a large number of upgrades throughout the city. So residential streets are now complete, but that excludes the locations where we have decorative type of poles. So the very standard, we call them octolite, because they're octagonal shape. They've all been done. Now we've got the ones where they've got bespoke type designs and we're working through them. We've also been working through the arterial roads and getting them well underway. So we still do have some work to do, and the team are continuing to work hard to make sure that that rollout is as seamless as what the work to date has been, and that includes working in the CBD and working closely with both the CBD Association and also the actual business owners. And we're just really proud of what we have actually achieved to date. There's been various reviews on the LED rollout in New Zealand, and they're all pointing to the fact that the blue light that we have chosen to use is the right solution, both for the animal life, the bats, etc., but also just for the residents. It's a far nicer colour. And to date, we've had very minimal customer requests or complaints with regard to the work that has been done. And we've been working really hard with various groups to make sure that the product out there has worked well for them. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks. Angela, please.
Thanks, Mr Chair. So we will be doing these over the whole city eventually, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And how long will that take?
I think the program's another 2 years. Yes.
So we've got big capex spends in year 2 and 3, 2.4 and 1.4 million.
Yes. Yeah.
So then that'll be the entire city done.
That's the city done. We do have in the newer developments where they've already installed LEDs themselves, so we don't have to go into those areas.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. Gary, please.
Thank you. Just a little bit confused. I remember us making this decision. It was a heavy subsidy which made the thing work for us, from memory.
Yes.
On paragraph 65, is this an additional bit of work? You're talking about an underground, under veranda, beg your pardon, for the CBD portion?
No, so this was always part of the program.
Yeah, was it?
Yes, yes.
But this part is not subsidised?
Correct.
Okay. And that was part of our original agreement, was it? Our original resolution?
Yes.
Okay. Why was it not subsidised?
So NZTA don't subsidise some lighting activities, and that's just one of the categories that doesn't fit.
So it's not seen as beneficial for traffic or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thanks. Siggy, please.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thank you, Robin, for that, for your report. Look, I just wondered, I was so clear on page 38, attachment 3, with the pictures that the light pollution has come quite dramatically down,
Yes.
which is awesome. Is light pollution measurable, or is it just visible, measurable? Or is there another measure that can...
I'll have to refer to my experts out the back around that.
Sorry.
Yeah, through the chair. Not easily. We can measure lux, so the amount of light that's produced on the road. It's very hard to measure, but you can see visually the pictures,
Yeah.
I guess. The feedback that we've had from the groups, like the observatory,
Yeah.
there's been a noticeable difference. So I guess we can measure point lux on the ground, but when you're looking in this night sky, it's a lot harder science.
Okay, yeah, but it's great. I mean, just looking at it visually is fantastic. I also heard through the grapevine, through this lovely lady there, Evalisa, that when the LED lights come, they come in cardboard packaging, not in polystyrene anymore.
Yes, so
That's a
certainly
great-
the infrastructure team have been looking at how they can make this whole exercise environmentally friendly as much as possible. So been looking at that sort of thing and how we dispose of them thoughtfully, the old units as well, so yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks. Mark, please.
For clarity, I thought, and I must have missed a point. When we were talking about the LEDs, I thought we were just doing the basic ones and not the ornate ones that might be around subdivisions. We've gone for everything now.
So we're working through them. So the easy ones were the base style.
Yeah.
The ornate ones or the decorative lighting, they're what we need to do next because there's still advantages to us with power savings and that sort of thing, and to get a good lighting level out on all of those streets to work through all of the decorative ones as well. They are just they take some more time because they're bespoke, and it's about working out what is the correct lamp that you can use in those.
Right, okay. So did we change the plan, or that was...
No, that's always been the
Always
plan.
been the
We
plan.
we knew that those decorative ones were going to be harder
Right.
to deliver, so we've gone in and got the bulk of it done.
Yep.
When we originally planned this program, NZTA had put a limit on that subsidy.
That's what it was, yeah. Okay.
And so the aim was to get as much done as possible, so we went for the easy stuff.
That's right, that's what
We've
Rob's
been
talking,
lucky
yeah.
that they have extended that subsidy, so that enables us to pick up those decorative ones as well.
Thank you. Cool.
Thanks. And Gary, for a second go, final question.
Thank you. The purpose of street lighting is to create light, but that kind of conflicts with people's not wanting to have light flooding into their homes.
Yes.
So how does that get addressed? Because I'm just looking at page 38 that Ziggy put up. At the Rototuna example, there's a... Pardon? Yeah.
So that is certainly something we've been aware of, and that was one of the...
So that Rototuna one there, the top photo of Rototuna, is that the old lights?
No, that's the city northwest top. Oh, sorry,
No,
Gary.
sorry, the top of the road, so there's two, yeah.
Sorry, gotcha.
Correct, yes. The more yellow one, the top one, is what was there, and the lower one is what we have got now. So the issue about light into people's homes is certainly a big issue.
Yep.
We actually get less with the LED lights because they don't spill as far as what the old lights did. And the few requests that we have had about the changeover have been where people have got some additional light in some cases, and the guys have been able to go out there and just alter the angle of the head just slightly to deal with that.
Okay, and that's a good service thing. But the actual purpose of the lights, street lights, is to safety and visibility and things like that. So we haven't lost anything in that regard?
No.
Is that your assumption?
That's correct. So we've looked specifically in the residential streets that lighting is being around pedestrians being able to get around safely, and we've done some what they call block reviews of those just to make sure.
Some what reviews?
It's a block review, so they just have a good look at the area. What we did was, for the residential areas, we've just gone in and replaced all of the heads on the existing street lights. We have got funding moving forward, and again, this was planned for to go back and have a little look more in depth, and particularly like some of the cul-de-sacs where they might literally only have one street light currently. We've got some funding planned for infill so that we can pop another pole up just to increase. For the arterial streets, they actually had a specific design so that they made sure that they were bringing everything up to the approved standards. So as far as lighting in the city goes, we have now actually brought the standards up to the appropriate levels. And so that's been quite a big improvement, both for road safety but also for personal safety for people moving around the city.
Okay, thank you. And we presumably we can measure the light
Correct.
that is being created from these things.
Yes, so that was what Sean was talking about. They call it a lux meter. Basically, they go out and they can, at night, actually measure the amount of light that we're getting down onto the road and make sure that we're meeting the appropriate standards.
And we're complying or meeting the standard?
Yes, and we're about to, we do a survey every about 4 or 5 years. So that was that last survey that we did that really identified, the benefits we were going to get from this work, and that survey is due to be done again in the next year or so that we'll be able to actually physically measure and see those benefits.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we're on to the Waste Task Force update. I know that Trent and Kirsty have been waiting with bated breath for this. Siggy, did you want to introduce this?
Yeah, I can say a couple of words towards it. Look, just like Councillor Bunting promoted his meeting, I'm going to do the same. On the 25th of February, we have a meeting, and everybody, all councillors are welcome, and it will be very exciting. Waste is just as exciting or as important as Access Hamilton, because if our streets are filled with waste, we won't go anywhere very quickly, even if you've got the fastest car. So, some of the things that have just come out is, for example, we've had the sevens, which was really exciting. But if some of you saw my post, I wasn't that excited about the rubbish that was left over. And we've had a chat yesterday about that. So this will come up in our meeting on the 25th in more detail of what has happened and what we can improve for next time. Really excited that we're working with Claudelands Event Centre and working on the recycling and waste reduction there. Also, there has been some national interest on plastics 3 to 7, so hopefully we know a little bit more next time. If not, there will be ongoing stuff happening, and Kirsty knows a lot more about that. And we're also watching Waipa now, because they're rolling out their bins, and so we might be able to learn something from their mistakes. So it's always good to watch the neighbour and see what's happening there, so we can learn something from them. And just the last thing I want to talk about just quickly is Keep New Zealand Beautiful. I don't know whether you all know that there's a young lady from Hamilton. She won the Tidy Kiwi competition. And actually she's spoken here before. And yeah, we haven't been part of Keep New Zealand Beautiful for a while. And I'm still driving in Dinsdale past the street, and they actually won something with, I think so, or maybe it was a council one, but it was the street that recycled the most. And I think something like that, we need some champions out there. Again, and we're working with something like that anyway, but having the business champions and ambassador program, which is awesome, but making individuals or individual streets champions, that will be probably something exciting as well we can work on in the future. But everything's outlined here, what we've been working on, and I'll just pass over now to Trent and to Kirsty, who've done an awesome job. They're working extremely hard. They've had challenges with staff and everything, and changing over and staff leaving and things like that. So I just want to congratulate them on what they've been doing so far. So thank you, and awesome working with you guys.
Thanks.
Kia ora koutou. Not really much to update in terms of the task force, really just to a reminder that we're progressing with the solid waste bylaw review, and there will be a briefing end of March around that, and also just a further briefing around the plastics international markets and what's happening nationally around that as well. So that's at the end of this month, the 28th of February. And, any questions?
Okay, we've got Paula first, thanks.
Just one question. Looking forward to getting up to date with your next meeting. But just about the Keep New Zealand Beautiful, I did ask when I first got here, but now I've forgotten what I was told. Hamilton used to be one of the Keep New Zealand Beautiful members, and then some decision was made that they would no longer participate in that. When we go to local government conference, Keep New Zealand Beautiful are always there promoting what they do to improve neighbourhoods, etc. Why are we not part of that national brand anymore? Is there a reason? Is it hugely costly? Why would we not be part of the brand? Just out of interest.
I'm not really able to answer it. I think it was a council decision that I wasn't aware of, but I can easily go back and...
Paul, at the Waste Task Force meeting on the 25th, that's going to, well, it's going to come up at a future Waste Task Force meeting. I'm not sure whether it's that one, but could it be that one?
It is at the next
Okay, it is that one.
Oh, is it?
And we could have that question answered there, perhaps.
That would be fine.
I couldn't even give you the answer.
No, I know it was a previous council, I just
Yeah.
didn't know why or what or where we're standing now, but yeah, that would be fine, thank you.
Thanks. Mark, please.
And thank you, Paula, that was my exact question, sir.
Okay, thanks. Gary.
Fantastic, Mark, thank you.
Yeah, can you do the same? Oh, no.
That's the same question. Look, just one thing I know about life is if you want people to do the right thing, it's better to make it easy to do the right thing. And actually at the Sevens, I bumped into Sean Murray in a pair of shorts, both of us. And I was actually just walking across Willoughby Park and I was doing the right thing, picking up a few beer bottles and things like that, and found that there wasn't a rubbish bin within Kui to put the rubbish in. Which, and Sean did advise me that there was actually there were people employed or volunteers doing the picking up. But I thought it would have been just in a situation like that. But anywhere, you know, often I find we are short of rubbish bins. And that was a particularly, because I happen to live over there, I'm very aware of it, that there's always stuff on Willoughby Park, which is, and I think a lot of people would put the rubbish in the bin if there was a bin for them to put it into. So I don't know if that's part of your task force update, but I see the Sevens as
in
in there.
relation to events, especially.
Yeah, I think it was, your observation was correct. It was one of the things that we picked up from the Sevens, and we've still got to have a debrief with the events and the organisation that assisted us, but location of the bins is probably not ideal.
Okay, because I'm there all the time, I mean, a couple of bins would be helpful all the time, not just for the Sevens.
So
because
you're talking outside the stadium, sort of around Willoughby.
Yeah, well, just round where the trees are on Willoughby Park, you know. There's a lot of people go there, rightly or wrongly, drinking. I'm not sure if you are allowed to drink there, but there's an awful lot of, an awful lot's an overstatement. There are numerous times when there's bottles, cans, primarily alcoholic, that are left behind, you know, McDonald's wrappers, all that sort of stuff. And I assume those people are just having a bit of an enjoyable afternoon. And I hope they would have put the rubbish in the bin if there was a bin to put it into.
Rather than a specific discussion about a specific site, maybe they can be on the agenda of the Waste Task Force and they can have a look at that, because there is some policy concern from Parks and Gardens, for instance, about where bins are, which I couldn't tell you what that is at the moment, Gary, but maybe we can have a look at that. And is it sufficient?
Yeah, I'm not specifically talking, I mean, that's the example I've got, but I assume we have the same
Understand.
policy around all our parks,
Yeah. We'll put it on the SIGI, on the agenda coming, thanks, Okay, great, thanks.
Lovely,
Note that there's a confidential briefing coming up on the recycling, plastics recycling, to tell us the latest, I presume, on that? Yeah. Thanks. Thank you. Great, thanks. Policy and bylaw review, are you doing that, Eva-Lisa?
I'll do this in terms of the policy and bylaw review. So this is just to give you an update on the policies and bylaws that are in terms of an ongoing commentary as to where we're at. Just of note is the encroachment licence policy. So at the 23rd of October Growth and Infrastructure Committee, it was resolved that staff will report back to this to the committee on the encroachment policy by March 2009. We're requesting a deferral of this to the 7th of May 2019 Growth and Infrastructure Committee meeting, as the scope of the policy is increased, and we've found that it involves a number of different, it requires an organisational approach to actually understand and make sure that that policy is robust as to what needs to come back to council. Therefore, and the resourcing we under-anticipated, so we're just requesting a deferral of that date.
So, councillors, when we receive the report, that will include that date being changed. We don't need to do a special motion to that, unless someone wishes, but that's what I'll move from the chair. Just noting that. Are there, Gary, question? Yep.
I just checked with Mark to make sure that he didn't know what an encroachment policy was as well, just so that I wasn't the only one who didn't know what it meant. You liar! What a liar! What's the encroachment licence policy?
So I'm going to...
You don't know either?
It is around, it's almost taking up the space of our roading corridor by a structure. So Robin can give a more detailed response.
That fence
in terms
on
of that.
River Road, just south of the Fairfield Bridge, where the fence
One we
sticks
dealt
out
with in
and sticks out of
1998.
the footpath area. Yeah,
Dave Frederickson's one.
yeah.
Yeah, so it just controls, the policy controls how
But isn't
that's
that just a
managed.
matter of who owns the property? I mean, do we have, sorry, tell me.
Let Robin answer.
So in October, we brought a report to councillors with regard to 2 Anglesey Street and a proposed encroachment licence, where that was enabling structures and stairs to be installed on the road reserve. And at that point, councillors expressed a desire to have some guidance and some direction from staff as to how these licences were being handled, because there had been various types of licences and encroachment licences brought to them previously. When we think about encroachment, that could be in a number of ways. It may be an underground activity coming into council controlled, so it could be parks and open spaces as well as road reserve. So it could be under the ground, it could be on the ground, such as stairs and structures, or it can actually be an airspace activity.
So broadly speaking, it's about someone doing something on council-owned land.
Correct.
With that, and then you just want a process whereby that can be approved or not approved.
Yes, so the policy will talk about how we deal with those, because some of them are very minor in nature. Others have a significant impact, and basically through that encroachment licence process, we're granting the ability for a party to use part of public space solely at their discretion rather than making it more available to the public. So the idea is to bring a policy proposal to councillors that talks about how we deal with that, ensuring that we don't end up having to come to councillors and waste your time for some of the very minor encroachments that we have out there that may be, 40 or 45 mils into the road reserve, and also being mindful of those ones that have more of a public interest.
So this will be a new policy, will it?
It's a proposed new policy. That's part of what the work is to investigate what sort of examples we have and to work through, is this a council policy or does it just need to be a management policy? But how do we provide that surety to councillors that we're dealing with these in a consistent manner throughout the organisation?
Okay, thank you, Robin.
Thanks. And that'll be back for the May meeting. Rob?
Sorry, just on that particular point, I think if I can remember back to that September meeting where this was raised last year, it was also about the impact of that encroachment licence on subsequent owners, because I think we had a situation where there was an encroachment licence granted to the developer. No, there was an application from a developer for an encroachment licence on units, on some apartments that he was presumably going to subsequently sell, and it was also looking at what the potential impact would be to subsequent owners. So could I suggest that your review of that policy also take into account the legal issues that might be around that, the ongoing effect of that licence and how it impacts on future owners?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Okay, we're going to move on to some things in Chris's area. Just on the order, I think we'll do Gordonton Road first, then the passenger rail update, and the last one will be the road reserve fencing, simply so it's efficient for the Mayor to go off for lunch earlier, because he's going to declare a conflict of interest in that road reserve fencing one, so we'll do that last on this group. So, Chris, the Gordonton Road corridor.
Yes, good afternoon, councillors. So Gordonton Road corridor, page 26, paragraphs 78 to 82. I think Councillor Bunting probably gave a general update in his Access Hamilton report. So this is just focused on the intersection upgrade. I think we've previously reported to council that there have been some delays just to do due to construction difficulties, but we are on target to complete the works by March 2019, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Gary, thanks.
Can you just explain what a raised safety platform is?
Yep, so Robin can help me out if need be here, but...
so the answer is no?
Yeah, no, I can. What we're putting as a signalised intersection on an urban fringe area where we have a speed problem. So we are working with NZTA to put in a raised platform, so the road will actually be elevated for the footprint of the intersection as a speed control, an additional speed control measure. So over time, people will get used to.
It's kind of like a speed hump.
Like a probably not, but like a speed bump or a threshold, but it's a lot more engineered than a speed bump. So it is an innovative way to deal with it, to put in a safe solution. So we're working very closely with NZTA on that. I don't know if Robin can add anything to that.
Just to add that we gave a good briefing at the Access Hamilton Task Force, and as part of the minutes we've got some pictures that we will include, so we'll make that available to councillors. I guess the big thing for this is that a lot of the speed humps that you've seen out in your residential areas have been aimed to get people to slow down to about 20 k's. So they can be quite aggressive in nature. So the ones that we're designing for this intersection are being designed to be able to drive over them comfortably and safely at 50 k's an hour. So that is being achieved by having...
So you don't want anyone lifting off the ground.
We don't want jerks of hazard happening in this particular intersection, so it is about making sure that the approach angles and also the length of the flat platform on the top are all very important as far as achieving that, and also recognising that we have heavy vehicles, trucks, buses and that sort of thing moving through this intersection as well. And ensuring that we're not creating problems for them.
So we're not going to have a discussion anymore about the technical aspects of it. It's been explained what it is. Any more questions, Gary?
Can you talk about the technical?
No. Okay, thank you. We're moving on to passenger rail update at the bottom of page 27 on to 28. Thanks. Chris?
So, councillors, paragraphs 87 through to 95. So council made a significant decision on 6th of December, and I've chosen to replicate the resolutions of council in paragraph 88, just for your information. So effectively it was endorsing the business case subject to NZTA endorsing the same and approving funding. So paragraph 89, the New Zealand Transport Agency met on the 14th of December and endorsed the proposal. Subject to a number of conditions, and I've chosen to attach those conditions on page 39 as attachment 4. So it is a decision to progress the proposal, but they put a number of checks and balances in place. We're working as a collective team with all of the stakeholders to understand some of those conditions of council. There are 3 points that I've replicated in 92 where we're seeking some further clarity on. The third bottom point is now resolved. The middle point is being resolved, and we're still waiting to hear from the top point. But I understand, unfortunately, Barry Dowsett's had to leave, but he's one of our significant contacts in the New Zealand Transport Agency. But we have the first working party meeting on the 18th in 6 days' time. And NZTA are pretty confident they'll have all of those issues resolved for us by that time. One of the resolutions of council was to report back on the terms of reference for the governance group. That will be discussed with the working party on the 18th of February and reported back to council. So in the meantime, there's a lot of activity in setting up the project structure, remembering that this is a multi-agency project with the bulk of the projects and work being done by regional council in terms of coordinating the services. Our part is the development of the Rotokauri rail station, so we're well poised to deliver that project and work under the umbrella of regional council. So happy to answer any questions.
Just want to correct you first. Rotokauri rail station, it's the Rotokauri transport hub, because it's serving buses as well as rail and other modes of transport. Thank you, Mr. General Manager.
It's usually me correcting you on that, Mr. Chair, so that's right, yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Gary.
Thank you, and I'm you may have just answered the question during a thing, but I'm not sure if you did. So on paragraph 92, is that the points you were talking about?
Those are the three issues arising out of the NZTA decision that caused us concern and we needed further clarity on.
Okay. Can you just explain to me, I would like some clarity on the things you want clarity on.
Yeah.
So what's the first bullet, what's the first bullet point?
So the first bullet point, if I keep it simple, is our business case that we put forward to government through NZTA was predicated on elevated levels of subsidy, up around 75.5% and 100%. So there's a whole range of different things. They've confirmed that in all components of the project except for that one, which is relatively small dollars, but it's for the maintenance of the carriageway once the service is started and operating. So our business case assumed 75.5% subsidy, and we believe their decision will only give Regional Council 50% subsidy. Okay. So we are still seeking 75.5% subsidy for the trial period, and that's the unresolved one, which they'll have an answer for us on the 18th.
Okay. So the first bullet point is about the maintenance of the rolling stock, but you just said the carriageway.
Rolling stock is the locomotive that pulls it and the carriages. So it's the.
So sorry, I'm confused because you said the bullet point. The first bullet point was, I read it as saying maintenance of rolling stock. You said it was about the carriageway. Carriageway is the rails.
Carriageways equals rolling stock.
Carriages.
Oh, does it? Sorry, I thought that was
Gary's right. Carriages, not carriageway.
Carriages. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So the train set.
Yeah. Okay. And the second bullet point, you just want to? I'm not too sure what's going on there.
So our part in this is to develop the PT facility at Rotokauri. There's two basic parts there. One is
PT means public transport.
Public transport. So that means it's, for us, it's not only a rail facility, but it's a bus facility for all the bus movements in the area and the park and ride.
Yep.
So there's two parts to that proposal. One is all of the work to put in hard rail engineering assets. So we've got to shift the lines, and we've got to put in a platform, and they've confirmed that all of that will be 100% at NZTA's cost. But then a smaller, another portion of that is the above ground, which is our work, which is developing the park and ride, putting in lightings, some shelters, and there's a lack of clarity that they have approved an elevated subsidy for that work. So my understanding, it was an omission in their board decision, and they're looking to correct that at the moment. It's a relatively minor part of the work, but it is still important to us that we get that clarity.
Okay, so I have a vision of a railway station, and there's a building. Who pays for that? And there might be a cafe in there, and that'll be you buy your tickets in there, and your toilets and things like that. Is that?
So remembering this is a startup service, so it's a balance between minimising the cost and the right level of service, but there will be an island platform in the middle of the up lines and the down lines. So at the moment, the lines
So you're
need
using
to be
terms
split.
I'm not familiar with. So what's in? So is that
So
mean
a
there won't be a
northbound and a
building
southbound.
you'll just be waiting outside for the train to come with you, and there might be a seat you can sit. Seating.
So the proposal for this station is to put a platform in between the northbound line and the southbound line. So we've got to move the lines apart to fit a
He's asking
platform.
about what's on the platform.
Yep, and so all of that will be done 100%, but for our cost is to then to put a very basic shelter on the platform for keep people dry if it rains.
That's all it would be. So it won't have toilets, won't have a cafe.
Toilets, all the tickets will be on board on the
won't
train.
be selling newspapers or things like that.
Not in the startup service. One can imagine it would evolve to that over time, but not for the startup service.
But we will pay for that part. Hamilton City Council, or well, whoever.
Our assumption is that we will be the lead, but we'd get 75.5% of the cost subsidised by NZTA.
For that little development.
For the shelters and for the lighting and the cameras and development of the park and ride.
Okay. And the third bullet point, availability of funding to keep progressing rolling stock refurbishment. So I know that we're not getting brand new stuff. So over time, because it says progressing, which assumes going out, how long will that continue for?
So there was two
Am I
parts
reading that right?
to the rolling stock. So the first part was purchasing them. That's now resolved with the board decision. So the 13 garages have now been purchased and are heading off to the workshops. But the next stage...
So they've been purchased and they're being upgraded or...
Yep, and the next stage is upgrading and refurbishing those. They've got to strip them down, check that they're safe, do all the safety certification, then start building them back for the service. So that's the refurbishment of the carriageways. The NZTA decision sort of capped the cost, which meant that we could only guarantee funding up until about February for that refurbishment program.
February 2020.
February...
next year.
2020.
Yeah, sorry, it was only guarantee funding up until partway through this year in 2019, but that's the issue that's now resolved, and they've increased their funding that allows the critical path to keep moving. So they've increased their funding to allow the refurbishment of those carriages to keep going.
And all of this, from memory, is contained within the $78 million capital cost, is that right?
Correct. I think it's 78 million total cost, which was operating in capital from memory. Yeah.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah, so none of this is additional cost. This is all.
So I remember, and not all of it's to the Hamilton City Council's cost.
No,
I know that.
absolutely
so there's
not.
From memory, it was $78 million capital cost, and it was about $6 million per year operating cost. Is from reading the business case or stuff.
It was in that order.
Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin.
I've just noticed, obviously, the structure of the working group governance, and if one has some individual points and queries, rather than having to sort of litigate it at this table necessarily, where's the conduit? I mean, obviously, we have, like Access Hamilton, we have that task force. Is it just really a matter of coming to you, Mr. Chair? I mean, as you know, I've already stated some minor issues around the Frankton station. I think the convenience toilets is an important issue, the ability to go into a waiting room.
Yeah.
Just some things that are not big deals, but could be quite significant basic additions to service.
The way to do that is if it's a minor detail through Chris, who's remaining on it as our management representative.
Yeah.
As the rep on the Waikato Regional Council Transport Committee, I was appointed to the rail governance group. So if it's a bigger issue, yes, but certainly don't want that sort of thing discussed here at that minor level.
The only thing is, I think, just looking for what I'd call small irritants that could be for low budget, could be
email to
solved.
Chris or personal meet, chat with him.
The other thing, and
it on the list.
I'm a bit concerned with a little slip of the word, because you say start-up, I get that, then there's the word trial. And there's a really expensive trial.
The only word that Chris has used here has been startup.
He did use the word trial.
I may have, but the correct word is startup, because it's really important that this is transitions into the corridor work and the bigger service.
I don't want to, because obviously all I'm trying to say is our messaging is crucial and wonderful work that you do.
I think it is a startup service. The word trial is used because that happens to be the language used in the funding and the NZTA funding, and we want to leverage the NZTA funding. So that's the word that they chose to use as qualifying. So it is a startup service. So the trial is about just securing the funding. And
I'm aware that the government's obviously looking at the medium long term, and I just perhaps to either you or the chair. About the ongoing evolution of the really good comms strategy that we talk startup, but the ultimate objective is all the way to Britomart, regular services throughout the day. It may take a few years to achieve.
I think the operative word there is all the way to Auckland CBD, because there are actually two stations.
That's right. Yes, of course.
And it may not be Britomart, it may be the other one.
And I'm saying that it seems to me that so that people, you know, have a context that when this first thing starts, this is purely a beginning, and then within 4, 5, 6 years, we've got to another point around more regular services.
The government in its official government announcement has said start-up from the start. They're not using the word trial. It's only the NZTA board that maybe is using that in its own pushback against its own government. But the part of the deal is that the monitoring of this start-up service has to lead into the discussions for what develops from that, including where other stations are, what trains they use, what lines they use, all of those questions.
Yep. Look, I think for us as council, there's a couple of really important things happening. One is the Auckland to Hamilton corridor. So clearly this start-up service needs to align with the Hamilton, the work being done on the corridor. The other thing is my understanding is that government has now confirmed the funding for another business case which is underway, which is a regional rail between Auckland, Hamilton and Tauranga. So government is developing its own business case for the big solution for regional rail. So there's a clear intent from this government to progress to a bigger and better regional rail service.
It's just, I think comms is really crucial, because remember when the Auckland, you know, the expanded Auckland passenger transport started a few years back, every little delay was front page in the Herald, and frankly there were those who, glass half empty, I think were quite happy to see the thing roll over before it could succeed. So I think if I may say, and you know, I think it's really crucial that we always keep reinforcing where we see the end game is at.
The last couple of years have seen Auckland rail public transport being the fastest growing PT in the country. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. Thanks, Martin. Okay, councillors, we're going to move on to the last point now, the road reserve fencing Liverpool Street, and the Mayor's indicated that he will declare a conflict and not participate in this. Following that, we'll break for lunch. I think it's better to get this all done, with your agreement, councillors. The only resolution at hang on, Rob, the only resolution at the end of all of this will be that we receive the report, the one at the start of this, which will cover everything, unless councillors move something else. So, Chris, over to you for road reserve fencing. Thanks.
So look, I've been asked to provide an update on this issue to committee in this report as part of the GM report. Look, from my perspective, this relates to an operational matter that was in my delegation to approve. I think the previous discussion on the encroachment licence, which just occurred a few minutes ago, was really relevant to this report, and I think it's important to differentiate this situation from those that require an encroachment licence. So for an encroachment licence, that's where we give approval for a landowner or a private landowner to have one of their assets in public space or to occupy public space. So it was mentioned the Anglesey Street issue. So in that case there, we had one landowner wanted exclusive use of public space to put a staircase in an unused bit of road reserve. So that's an encroachment licence that we worked through, where we require an agreement with the landowner about the terms and conditions of him having his asset in our public space and under what conditions. Now, and that what developed in that situation for us was we had progressed that discussion at a staff level. It was apparent there was a high community interest in that because we were entering into an agreement with the landowner, and so out of that came the action to bring back an encroachment licence policy. So, Councillor Rob, I think the issue that you started talking about might have been a different issue, because remember about the same time we had a developer who wanted us to close part of a road down by just down the bottom there. So we brought that to council with the proposal to start a road stopping process because he wanted to use that bit of land to make his land footprint a little bit more friendly to building some buildings on. And that got into some community engagement. In the end, he pulled out of it. I think that might have been the issue you were talking about.
What I was specifically referring to was the staircase.
Was the staircase.
Yeah, and I guess it was more around, as I mentioned in the discussion with Robin a little earlier, it was around the impact that it might have in council's potential legal obligations with future owners.
So the developer was doing that, and then the units were presumably going to be sold, which was
And that was my only concern was around where council might sit legally.
Rather than straying too much into the policy, because that is going to come back, can we just deal with this?
Yeah. So look, so the outcome of this particular matter that we're talking about is not about a private asset in the public space. It's about an asset that we own and we control, and we're not giving away any control of that public space. So look, I've set out in paragraphs 84 to 86 my reasoning in the process that I followed in making this approval. I'm happy to answer any questions, but it was driven from a safety concern, because if you know the area, there's a very steep drop-off from that road down to the river. In my view, that there is no safe, practicable access from the road to the river. If at some point in time council wanted to put in a safe access, we've got full control to do that and open up for public access. So look, I'm happy to just respond to any questions on that.
And look, just before you do, I'll just explain that on the night before these agenda papers were being finalised, I was informed that there was a potential issue because the mayor was involved here, obviously, as the property owner. I had a discussion with Chris, and he assured me that it was following normal practice and procedures. And I asked him, notwithstanding that, to put a report into the GM's report so we could have full visibility and not be accused correctly anyway of trying to hide the issue. So that's why it's here. We got that in time to go into the main report. So that's just by way of process why it's there. We've got questions from Paula first, then James.
Thank you. I think I understood what you said there, but I just want to double check. The retaining and wall and fence, is it on? Does it extend into public land?
I think important, there's a couple of separate issues here. So the mayor as landowner went through a consent process to put a retaining wall in for his property. So this has got nothing to do with on his property.
So none of that retention goes onto public land in any way?
No. So that's fully on his private property, properly consented. This is a peripheral issue while we were doing the work. So we had some stormwater work that we had to do, and my team had to climb down the bank to get to a manhole, and it's very safe and unsafe and very steep on this road. And that resulted in discussions about the safety aspects of the fall from the road down to the river below on the public land.
Sorry, so what came first, the request to put the fence and gate, or that?
When you say that, what do you mean?
You're going on to the stormwater work?
No, that was all part of the proposal to for the landowner to put in his retaining wall on private property.
So while he was doing the rightly consented work to put the retaining wall, because I've been asked about this, people can see that retaining wall from Mars, it's humongous. But so while he was doing the retaining work, you went on and did some work around the stormwater, is that what you said?
Yeah, part of the retaining work under the building consent required a connection to our stormwater system. Right. So there's a proper process to go through, which the landowner followed to
that's
a
fine.
connection process. So we were there working in that road reserve, doing that for him through our city delivery team.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So the fence and the gate were asked for at the time of consent, or that's a later issue?
No, it was
later issue?
a subsequent issue towards the end of that process.
Okay, at the request of the landowner.
Correct.
Okay. And so it is a very steep piece of bank. It wouldn't be the only dangerous steep piece of the bank along the riverside under which stormwater exists, would it though? It'd be, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but there are many parts of, it's very unfortunate that someone fell. There's a lot of dodgy parts of the riverbank that are quite steep and dangerous, aren't they, from a public point of view? But what you're saying is that, you know, if you go off the paths, that is. So what you're saying is that this is in the best interest of the public to put this gate and fence there?
In my opinion, yes, until such time as if council wanted formal access down there to put in a proper, safe access, it will be reasonably difficult to do, because if you know it is pretty steep down there, but if they wanted to put a stairway in, we've got full control to open it up for public access if we wanted to do that. But in the meantime, it's like a lot of things in the network. I have lots of discussions about lots of issues with different people, and you take opportunities when they arise. So yep, there will
this
be
is
other
an opportunity that you see to improve public safety at a very small stretch of the riverbank. Is it what you're saying?
So basically, can we step back? There's a whole lot of different parts going on here. So as part of the resource consent for this, to the retaining, which has nothing to do with this particular issue, there was a requirement for us to connect certain stormwater aspects to the stormwater drain. At that point in time, the property owner was aware, through discussion with the team, how precarious that particular part of the bank was, and that led the property owner to basically offering the opportunity to extend a fence right along, including part of the public reserve, to provide protection for that space. So the situation arose. It was an opportunity. The fact is that a member of the public, the property owner offered at their cost to meet the cost of putting that fence across, and so
mostly on his land and partially on public land.
No, sorry, it's not on his land, it's on the road reserve.
Yep, so there was an opportunity. There are other aspects of the river, and that this potentially will be the case, and if we assess there to be a health and safety risk that we can address, it'll highly likely be at our cost. And we were fortunate in this situation where the landowner picked the chart.
We're not discussing the policy generally or the issue generally. We're discussing this particular occasion.
That's right.
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, people will ask.
No, I'm not saying that to you. I'm actually saying that to the CEO, because I don't want us to get into the broader area.
I'm stopping there.
I understand that. And just, you know, if the public take an interest in these matters, and they will because of who the landowner is, we need to be able to say that this has been treated in exactly the same way as it would have been treated were he not the person he is.
Yeah. I guess the different treatment, Paula, is that if that happened with any Joe or Jane Bloggs who wasn't on council, it probably would never have made it onto the agenda paper, but I thought for visibility, transparency reasons, it should be there, so any doubts can be discussed and openly.
Thank you. So I've had my question.
So just for clarity, I would respond to anybody, and I do, and most of you have worked with and know that I do respond to these issues. So if somebody else came to me with the issue, and they'll all be different, I quite often meet on site and I come to similar arrangements. And when we've got to spend money, it's a different proposition, because we've got to think about our priorities in spending money. But this is an opportunity. It's been at no cost to council, improve safety, and the important thing for me, and why I took it as my delegation, because I haven't given away control. So if council wanted to, we could take the fence away tomorrow if we want. I would not recommend that, because I think there is a safety issue there that that we need to be aware of. And if we wanted to spend some money and put a safe access down.
No, I understand that now. You've answered my question.
And we still have access to our stormwater drain.
It was just around the even-handedness, so that we can justify it on that it was an even-handed treatment that was was justifiable in the circumstances.
Yep. But it'll be a case-by-case discussion for similar ones.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks. I've got James next, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris. I think I know where this property is. But this would date back a few years, wouldn't it? Because it's referred to here as the dealing with the same time as a young man who fell off Anglesey Street, Grantham Street. That was a number of years ago.
Yeah, so that happened in about March 2015, I think. But like a lot of these things, there was a long process of investigation, and that one ended up in a coroner's investigation. So maybe about a year previous to this, we were dealing with the coroner's court, and we were involved in that and had our actions examined through the coronial inquiry. So clearly, and it still is fresh in my mind, in terms of there are dangers of people falling down banks. In that case, it was a tragedy, and the guy died. So clearly, it was in my mind in making this decision.
So how long ago was this fence built?
So look, the discussions were about May this year.
Last year.
May last year, sorry. So my understanding, the fence is a couple of weeks ago, the fence started putting up, but it hadn't met my requirements, which was for a gate for access to our manhole. So that there's some correction work going on, and I understand it might, in the last day or so, might have been finished, ready for our inspection and acceptance as an asset.
Yeah, there'd be lots of safety issues right along the Waikato River, wouldn't there, in the city centre?
Look, I think Councillor Southgate made the point. There will be other cases where there are safety issues. You know, for us, it's not just about falling down banks. It's about stormwater ponds and access into stormwater ponds. So we have a number of risks around the network which we have to manage. So some of them, a lot of them we deal with just when the opportunity arises.
Okay, so the fence now is our ownership now?
The intent is the fence comes into our ownership. I've just got to check that it's been, built to our robust specification, that the gate is the right width to get our vehicles through, and there's a few requirements we just got to check, then it will become our asset.
Okay, have there been any reimbursements given to the landowner regarding the fence or the retaining?
No. If I understand the question, have we paid
the landowner? So the fence has been built by the landowner?
Yep.
Are there any reimbursements given back to them?
There's no intent for council to pay for any part of that.
Okay, just the upkeep of the fence?
Yep, so that's the responsibility of us. We'll accept it as our asset, which we'll have to maintain into the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rob, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Chris, for the detailed explanation of encroachment, because that was the first thing I thought of when I was reading this, that it had some similarities to that, and quite clearly the circumstances are different. Is there a precedent, and do we have a number of these sort of situations that arise around the city where a landowner will want to do something on council land and seek our approval to do that in the way that the Mayor has sought to do this?
Look, in my experience, and I'm just trying to think, most of the time the pushback is for council to do these things and for council to fund them. We do have quite a lot of circumstances which fall into the encroachment where people want to do things in public space for their exclusive right or use for their benefit.
Yep.
It's very rare, in my opinion, for someone to offer to do something and pay for something for public safety when there's no direct benefit to themselves in terms of fencing off an area that they can use as for a barbecue area or whatever, so that's not the case here. This is clearly a fence for safety reasons. So
Rob, I
it's
can
unusual.
just give you an example of where I was aware that happened a few years ago at the end of Parr Street off Norton Road. There's a steep gully that backs onto Seddon Park eventually. Sorry, not Seddon Park, the Rugby Park area, Myrtle Gully, and there's a drainage arrangement there for the street water from the edge that one of the neighbours right at the end of the street wanted to also have stormwater drainage there. They were required by council at the time to connect, to build a new connection on public land there and vested in council's ownership. So it was of benefit to them, but they weren't the owners, but they had to pay for it. We were the vested owners afterwards, but it improved our system.
But that was a regulatory requirement, was it, for us?
No, it was a one-off requirement by Chris's
By the landowner.
predecessor, actually, required it of them in order for them to be able to connect to improve the whole drainage thing there and pay for it.
Okay. And you've described in the report the landowner at 2 Liverpool Street. Is that open and transparent to where some of us might have known, or that it was in fact the mayor's residence?
I guess if we
go back to, say, some of the licence applications, or the licence application for Anglesey Street was quite clear in that report, the name of the owner who was wanting to do something on public land. In this case, we seem to have not been perhaps quite so open with who this owner was.
It's certainly not deliberate. So look, my thought process at the time when I had the request was who's directly affected. So, I went in a formal manner to our Parks and Open Spaces team to see whether there's any objection there. And I talked to our city delivery team about ongoing access to the pond. I talked to our city transport team about it being an asset. But also this fence was to butt up to number 2 Anglesey Street. So it was my judgment that, a bit like an affected party consent, that they needed to be happy with it. So I secured a letter from the body corporate, secretary of the body corporate, and the name or the identity is not secret, who furnished me with a letter that said that they, from memory, I think they supported the safety concerns and they had no objection to the fence going up, because this fence was butting onto their private fence, if you like.
They're the neighbour on the other side of the road.
There's a neighbour on the mayor's property, if you're looking down towards the river, is on the left-hand side. This was the property on the right-hand side of Liverpool Street.
Yep. Okay. And that's the one that is overlooking the river also, is it?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
And so there's a body corporate there, I think it's about 4 units, so I got a letter from the body corporate to say they supported it and they didn't have an objection to the fence going up under these conditions.
Yeah, okay. And in that last bullet point in 86, you mention that the intent of this was to allow future public access totally at the discretion of council. Is that quite normal, and would that discretion be unreasonably denied? I mean, I appreciate the safety issue, but is it free? Would the intent be that any individual could access at their own risk, presumably, go through the gate and get access to the reserves there if they wanted to for any particular, I can't think of a reason why they might want to, but if they wanted to do that.
Look, what I was trying to say there is, in my opinion, it would be unsafe unless you were an abseiler to get down to the river. But if council, wanted to provide a safer access, we could spend money and put in a stairway, for example. And we wanted to allow that future public access. There is no tie that I've got to the landowner that says I can't do that. We've got full control because it's our asset, and the the understanding is that we could do something and take the fence away tomorrow if we wanted to. So for me, it was about control. So I don't have any conditions about the fence that restrict our control of what we do with that asset, depending on what the issue is or what might develop in the future.
Okay, and the fence itself, and I may know the answer to this, but I'm just not sure. The fence will always remain a council asset and will never feature on the land title of 2 Liverpool Street as being an asset or a.
Absolutely not.
No. Okay. Yep. Okay. And would you normally bring this type of, Chair mentioned about the Mairoa Gully one some years ago. Is this a typical report? Would we automatically get a report like this, or would there be some I mean, you know, my understanding is that this report may have come about because there was some media interest in the fence that perhaps potentially prompted this report to appear in this section and then be confirmed in the chair's report. Yep. Would a report like this, if I offered to plant some trees in the gully that immediately surrounds my property, and I sought permission from you to do that at my cost, to plant trees, would that have to go through a similar process and be an automatic report in a meeting, you know, in a meeting like this, or is it?
Look, in my view on this one, no, because I believe it's in my delegation and it's an operational issue. That was my judgment. You're quite right. You know, I was asked to bring this report to council because there were media inquiries. It's probably best for the chair to answer, but he became aware that the media were asking questions, and my understanding, he just thought it would be transparent for me to explain to council what I'd done under my delegation. So, but it wouldn't be normal, in my view, to bring operational matters like this to council. Sometimes there might be judgment exercised in doing that and what we do, and you know, I'm not sure I would act differently again. I probably would do the same thing. I still think it's an operational issue because of the control.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Gallagher for the last one.
Yes, as a private citizen, probably as an MP, I brought to the attention of a councillor a sheer drop from a footpath in Hillsborough Terrace down to the river area. I understand I rang the council through my office within about the month that fence was at full cost to council was built, because it was perceived as a NOS issue, as a danger. It hadn't been pointed out. Is it fair to say that this fence is primarily motivated by issues of public safety?
Correct.
Is it fair to say that if the property owner had not offered to build this fence at that person's own expense, then I could have gone along as a member of public and started to lobby for the fence to be built in any way once it had been brought to your attention?
I think we're getting very hypothetical there.
Well, I think the issue is here. This is where, forget who the property owner is, we've got a situation where a property owner has done stuff that has saved us some money.
Well, that's for your speech to the motion. That's not a question. You may very well say that when you speak to the motion, but not a question.
Well, point of order,
no,
that may not be accurate. So I think Martin's totally appropriately saying, is this something that has saved the council money?
No, sorry. I reject your point of order. I rule it out. He made a statement. There was no question there. I ruled that was a statement. I continue that ruling. I think the Deputy Mayor well knows that he was making a statement and not a question. So let's move.
Didn't really know,
no,
but you've told me.
No. The first one was a question. The second one was a statement. So, councillors, are there any more questions? Do you have another question? An actual question?
Yes, I do. An actual question. Each of us as elected members can have some issue on our property. I have an issue, or have had issues on my property where I'm having to be Mr. Gallagher, and I've been clear about that. Is there some process by which that's noted, or do you just judge whether that's, you need to bring that to the attention of council or not?
Yeah, look, every case is different. Every single day we've got engagement with the community who raise issues with us. Someone from council, I would like to think, promptly goes out to talk to them about it and will make a judgment call. And quite often that judgment call is about spending money. So we need to prioritise the need in our budgets, and sometimes that might drive our decision. Sometimes the safety imperative might drive our decision and priority. In this case, it was quite easy for me because there was a clear safety issue, and there was an offer to fund a solution that was at no cost to council. But every case is different.
Can I point out here that at the start of every one of our committee meetings and council meeting, there's a thing called declaration of interest. And some organisations, such as another one that you're on, actually have a register of interests, and that can change from time to time. And you would hope that if any council elected member was involved, they would declare that either in a section like that or,
we have one also.
Or some written document.
Absolutely.
We have one also.
We have one also.
In this case, it was clearly declared.
It was declared, and I advised the mayor not to be present during the discussion, not to be present at the table during the discussion.
Okay.
I think that's how we handle those declarations of interest. If there's nothing else, councillors, I'd just like to do the resolution on page 16, and I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Taylor as deputy. Just note it defers two reports. B defers the corridor plan report to the 26th of March meeting, and B, and C defers the encroachment report to the May meeting of this committee. We've already briefly discussed both of those. Other than that, it's just receiving the report. And we've had the definition, Rob, of receiving just before from Becca. From our standing orders. So that's been moved and seconded. Gary, do you wish to speak to it?
I just want to ask a question.
Sure.
There's no scenario here where we're not being asked to approve the issue with regard to the fencing. This is just being advised that this is what's happened.
It was, yes. Fair point, fair question. It was purely for information. The council can, of course, choose to move an amendment to that if they wish to say something different from what the motion says. So
we're not even being asked to approve that issue. We're just being advised of that issue, as with all of this report.
There's an assumption that by receiving it, that the general manager's opinion that it's an operational issue is what it is. Yeah, that's the inbuilt assumption, if you like. Mark, did you wish to speak to this?
Just briefly, taking it way back, because this has been a big report, and I'd like to thank you for the report. Just want to reinforce both my point and Siggy's point in regards to task forces. There's some really good oil that goes on in those. I've extended the invitation to Mange Norm as well to come along to Access Hamilton. This isn't an ad or a paid party political broadcast. This is where we get some really good stuff done, and we can ask some stupid questions because there's no such thing as a stupid question. But often around here, when we've got the cameras on, we're a little bit, nervous about asking those questions. So, to me, it's a deep dive into the knowledge. I know I've dragged Gary along to various public transport things as well, just so we can pass stuff through the Gary litmus test, which I think is really healthy. We come up with some really, really good solutions as a result. So just reinforcing what Siggy said and what I said before about the task forces, they're not just sort of little playpens. We get some really good work done, and we bond with staff and we rely on their brilliant knowledge. So another wee plug for that.
Thank you. Rob, please.
Yeah, look, I'd just like to make a comment about the matters in paragraphs 83 through to 86. And that is, I think, no matter how benevolent we are and how good we think we are doing good things for the city as councillors, I think we need to be mindful of potential conflicts of interest. We are in the media spotlight, and it is embarrassing to me anyway as a councillor when these sorts of situations arise and potentially become a field day for the media. I'm heartened by having read the draft, I've lost the word now, not the code of, the draft standing orders, which we will be looking at in March, that there is some good notes there on conflicts of interest. And I think, and I've cringed at times around this table over this particularly over this last term, when there have been obvious conflicts of interest, which fortunately haven't been picked up. But I think it's important that as councillors, and if you're not sure, we get some training on conflicts of interest so that we can not only protect ourselves, but also the mana of this council around these situations, which will arise. I mean, we are citizens and most of us residents of the city that we represent. And so therefore we must be mindful of what we do in our own lives and our own business activities to be open and resilient to deal with conflicts of interest when they arise. Thank you.
Thanks. Gary, please.
Thanks. I'm glad Rob did his little preaching then, because I see absolutely no situation where anyone around this table at this particular issue has behaved inappropriately. I think the guidance we have had from staff and from you, Dave, and the situation that Andrew's no longer here.
Sorry, just point of order.
Thank you.
Yeah, point of order. My point of order is I have not suggested in any way that anyone has acted inappropriately. I have really just talked about conflicts of interest and how we might deal with them when they arise.
I just wonder if you cringe do you cringe all the time, Dave, on Rob, or not?
Let me answer it, thanks. You're correct, except that you did talk about yourself cringing several times, which implied that there had been that. So I think that's what Gary is referring to. So Gary, if you can actually sheet any comments you make home to what Rob actually said, that's fine.
Cringe.
Okay. Thanks. You may continue. But he certainly didn't accuse anyone of having a conflict of interest, any specific
It's quite
case.
clear what he was referring to and who he's referring to. That's me done. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Look, I'm just Councillor Gallagher's come back in. I thought I'd cringed at him and not to speak, but now he is.
I've listened intently to the debate and discussion, and I certainly acknowledge the issue of conflict and conflict registers, which to the best of my knowledge has been followed to the letter by elected members. I know as an elected member I'm crystal clear. If I address an issue as a member of the public, I say Mr Gallagher. I'm crystal clear in stating that out, and I think with respect Councillor Mallett has put the button on the head. There's nothing in this issue we've just discussed that implies anything that the landowner in Liverpool Street has not acted with the utmost integrity and decorum, and the fact that the GM, with the advice and discussion of the chair, has been clearly reported to this council, that puts above and beyond any doubt, in my view, in that specific case.
Thanks, and I'll just briefly say at the end that I absolutely agree with Rob's point as a matter of principle, and it's the way we should conduct ourselves. But I do come back to Gary and Martin's point that in this case there was no such thing, and if anything, I erred on the side of putting it into the public arena, if you like, just to avoid any shadow of doubt. And to lance any potential boil, and I would do that again if any councillor was involved in something, but I would also hope that all councillors, elected members, and Mangai Norm are, and I know he's very aware because he's had conflict issues 2 or 3 times already, that you'd be proactive about raising anything like this so we never get into that situation. Thanks. So with the recommendations as written on page 16, moved and seconded, we'll take a show of hands. Those in favour, against, carried unanimously. Thanks. Let's break for lunch until 2:15. Is that all right? Yeah.
Could take 40 minutes.
How about 2:20? Yep, everyone,